Okay. Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vasishyate. So welcome to our weekly session on Saturday. Now we shall continue on our journey of who am I. Now, in fact, there's a very famous quote by one of the Greek philosophers, which reads like this: knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom. Rest is all information. Knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom. So we should know ourselves, who am I? And that is why this topic is very, very important. Now, in the last session, we saw the various layers of human constitution. We started with the gross body, and then we came to the pranic energy, we came to the sense organs, we came to the mind, we came to the intellect, and we briefly analyzed the ego part. And we realized that these are not subjects, because we also say our mind. So mind is not me, it is my mind or our mind, my intellect. So intellect is not me. And my ego, mera ahankar. Now that is also not me. Now, what is me? Before we go to that, we will just address the question of ahankar. You saw when we were, uh, discussing chapter 15 of Bhagavad Gita, we also analyzed the sequence of what you call, the manifestation of the universe. And from that manifestation, it became very clear it starts from Avyakt, and then it goes to what we call Mahat Tattva or Mahan, and then ego. So actually, ego is the first important element in manifestation of this universe. Without ego, you cannot have individuality. If I don't feel that I am, then there's no individuality. The individuality is given by ego. And that is why this ego is what we call leads to pluralism, plurality. Ek se anek. From one, it makes millions and trillions. Like you take some clay, and from that clay, you make different kind of, figures. You make a figure of Krishna, you make a figure of Rama, you can make a pot, and you can make a, surai, you can make a matka. So you can make millions of, objects out of the same clay. Similarly, from the apratyaks and from the Mahat Tattva. Now, Mahat Tattva has to be converted into different manifestations. Then the ego has to be there. Without ego, the plurality is not there. And the purpose of introducing ego is to bring, multiple manifestations in this universe. We bring, now there are 84 lakh, 8.4 million different kind of bodies of living beings. 84 lakh. Now those are different manifestations of different living beings. And out of those 84 lakhs, even if we take one manifestation, that is human being. Now human being, each one of us is different. Even our fingertips are different. Our iris of our eye is different. We can be identified on the basis of our hair. So that pluralism or plurality or ek se anek, it actually has its origin in ego. And that is why ego is very, very subtle. It is called sukshamtam of all the suksham elements of human constitution. That is the mind, intellect, and ego. Ego is the most suksham of all that. So it is not that easy to understand it, you know. And that is why many times we actually mix up with swabhiman and ego, and we say that swabhiman is not ego, but swabhiman is also part of ego. Actually, ego has various stages. Swabhiman, you can call it the first stage. Then you can call abhiman. Then you can call, damb. Now, damb is a very different manifestation of ego. So there are many, many ways of expression of ego. But ego is the one which gives you individuality. And that is why, Kabir said, and let me read out that message of Kabir. I have put it down here. जब मैं था तब हरि नहीं, अब हरि है तो मैं नहीं, सब अंधियारा मिट गया, दीपक देखा माही. जब हरि है तो मैं नहीं, जब मैं गायब हो गया तो परमात्मा मिल गया. जब मैं था तब हरि नहीं था. So long as this ego remains, you cannot be one with the Supreme. So ego has to be actually discarded in gradual way, and it is so subtle that it is not easy to discard it. It comes in variety of forms, variety of ways, and we feel hurt if somebody abuses us. Now these are only words. Somebody, वो चाहे आपको गाली दे, प्रशंसा दे, they are only words. But those words impact on the ego, and ego is hurt tremendously. So ego is the most, I would say, subtle and most difficult step to or to transcend in the journey of spirituality. Now, one simplest way to transcend ego is to look at the universe. When we look at the universe, we see there are, so many galaxies, trillions of, galaxies. In each galaxy, there are millions of solar systems. In each of the solar systems, there are planets, there is solar, sun, and if you make a count of these systems, they turn into trillions and trillions and trillions. These are huge systems. Now imagine in solar system of ours. Now in that galaxy called Akash Ganga, our solar system is insignificant. In our solar system, Earth is insignificant. This is one of the small planets. And on the Earth, we are little, creature. So if you look at the whole universe, we are not even equal to a particle of dust which we see on the Earth. And if we keep reminding of ourselves of this particular context, then I think we will slowly, slowly dilute our ego, because we feel that the world is going because of us, going on because of us, or the family is going on because of us, or this thing is going on because of us, or that thing is going on because of us. Now that feeling will get diluted when we think of this universe and the place of Earth in that universe and our own place on the Earth. Then slowly, slowly we will realize that in this entire universal system, we are absolutely insignificant. We have, our role is not even equal to a dust particle. So this is how we have to think about it. And then second way to dilute our ego is that if you analyze your own life, if I analyze my life, for example, I have discovered in my life that most of the things happened because of some coincidences, not because I planned them that way, not because of my power and my force that those things happened. They just happened in some way in my life and gave a new direction to the life, completely new direction. I'm sure this would be true with each one of us. If we look at our very first coincidence of our life is our birth, where we are born. Now, do we control that? We do not control birth. It happens. And in which country you are born, whether your parents are well off, whether they are not so well off, whether you are born as healthy child, whether you are born as a challenged person, whether your circumstances of life are in very cold country or in hot country, what language you will speak, what kind of food you will eat, what kind of dressing pattern you will follow. All this depends on the coincidence of birth. So do we control it? We don't. We have been just sent here. So there is somebody who is controlling. So what is my control on that? So that is another way of looking at, that the ego, how to dilute the ego. Then look at another thing. In this universe, great people have come and gone. There was a time when Mahatma Gandhi and Nehru, they thought that if they die, then what will happen to the country? The country goes on. The life goes on. There's nobody who is who cannot be spared. Everybody is taken away by nature and something else comes and replaces him. Similarly, in office, sometimes we feel that once I retire, what will happen to this office? Or once I am transferred somewhere else, what will happen to this office? It's running because of me. No, the things go on. The, the living beings are not important. The life is important. The life continues for eternity. The living beings come and go. So that is how we have to look at this suksham element of ego, that the world is not going on running because of us. The world is running on its own rhythm. We have been sent here to play our small little role, and we play that and we go away. So this is how we have to dilute thinking in the different directions. Now, even look at our own body. When we discussed this issue yesterday and last week, we we saw that we do nothing to digest the food. Do we feel hungry? We feel hungry on our own. Somebody makes us feel hungry. Somebody makes us feel thirsty. It is not our creation. There's no contribution from our side. When we feel hungry, we eat, and then the food digested on its own. You don't do anything to digest it. It happens on its own system. Look at a child, he eats and the food gets digested. So every system in our body is running on its own. We have played no role in either constituting the system or to make it run. So if we look at any way, either at universal context or in the context of the world in which we live in the context of our birth in which we came into this world, in the context of the organizations and the families and others where we live in, and in the context of our own body system, we feel that we have very little control over things. Things happen and they give us the direction and we follow the direction. So the universal consciousness, runs this universe, not we. We have been sent to play a small role, which we play and we go away. Once we start realizing this, slowly and slowly, the ego dimension will get diluted, and at a stage will come when you will become without any ego. And then the outside praise and criticism will not impact on you. Then if somebody is abusing you or somebody is praising you, will have no impact on you. And you will continue in performance of your duties as you think they should be done. And that is the final approach to dilute the ego process. So this is what I thought I'll mention, add to ego, because this question was raised in the last session. Now, another question which has been raised, that, you know, mind and intellect, they can be clubbed together. Yes, we call it antakaran. Actually, the four parts of antakaran are very suksham. The four parts are man, buddhi, ahankar, and chit. And they are actually physical, but they are so small, so minuscule, that the physicality of these is not possible to see or observe. Like no doctor or no scientist can tell you where your mind is. Physically, they cannot trace it. They cannot trace the intellect. They can trace the brain, which is physical, but they don't know where the mind is and where the intellect is and where the ahankar is and where the chit is. They cannot tell you all that. They can dissect your brain and see all those neurons inside, but beyond that, they can do nothing, because these things are beyond human perception, human sense organs. Mind is the controller of sense organs, and therefore the sense organs cannot look at the mind. It's not possible. The sense organs are not capable enough to look at all these four elements. But in the antakaran, you can feel them. You can feel your mind, you can feel your intellect, you can feel your ego, and you can also feel your chit. So these can be felt inside your antakaran, but they cannot be seen or heard or even described by words. So these are what you call subtle elements of our human constitution. So now we are very clear about the layers and how the one layer controls the next layer. The gross body is controlled by our sense organs. Sense organs are controlled by our mind. Mind is to some extent controlled by our intellect. It's not always so, but yes, uh, uh, quite often we try to use our intellect to settle our mind. And then all these can be upset or can be, turned upside down by ego. Like, for example, the current issue in many countries, or particularly, say, between Ukraine and Russia, it's basically an ego issue. If you look at the World War First, I went to the place in Sarajevo where this whole thing, actually started. And this was all because of the ego process. Similarly, if you look at the Second World War, this was again started from ego. So most of the wars, most of the conflicts, most of the enmity which we have in the world, they have their origin in ego. But ego is very, very subtle. So now let us go to the next layer beyond the physical constitution. Now, from our subject object analysis, it became very clear that mind is not me. We call it my mind, my intellect. Intellect is not me. My ego. Ego is not me. So, what is me? Me is basically what our sages have said and what we can realize is our Chaitanya, our consciousness. Now, this we can feel it, And we also have, as per the Vedantas, we don't have a pratyaks praman. In Vedanta, three pramans are or three ways of evidencing for certain things, analyzing certain things are well established. One is pratyaks praman, that is, you can see the things and you can say that this is in existence, this is not in existence, this is how it was, this is how that was. So that pratyaks praman does not give you any evidence of Chaitanya because you cannot see Chaitanya anywhere. It's not visible, it's not tangible, you cannot smell it, eh? You cannot touch it. So none of your sense organs are capable of realizing or feeling the Chaitanya, the consciousness. Now, the second praman is called, Anuman praman. Anuman is like, for example, you see somewhere smoke, then you will guess that there should be fire because there cannot be any smoke without fire. So that is called Anuman Praman. You estimate it. Now we can use this methodology to understand that there is Chaitanya. How do we wait for this? Because the consciousness is the one which is driving my this instrument of body and mind. I am walking because of the consciousness. I am eating because of the consciousness. I am sleeping because of the consciousness. I am able to talk to you because of the consciousness. If the consciousness is not there, then I won't be able to discharge any of those functions. So since I am discharging these functions, and once a person dies, his body starts disintegrating, he cannot discharge any function. So it is very clear that consciousness is the one which is actually responsible for our survival and for running our the instrument of body in variety of ways. So from this Anuman Praman, this becomes clear that it is consciousness which runs our body and which keeps it alive. And this is how our sages have concluded that consciousness is me. It is the subject and everything else is an object. When a person dies, in India we say, उसने अपना देह त्याग कर दिया. जैसे मोहन died. मोहन ने अपना शरीर त्याग कर दिया. So Mohan was not शरीर. मोहन तो चला गया. तो मोहन क्या था? मोहन वो उसकी चैतन्य था, चेतना थी. वो चेतना चली गई. वो शरीर पीछे रह गया. So this is how it is. So from Anuman Praman, we can feel that I am consciousness. I am alive, I am living, I am discharging all my functions. I am able to use my sense organs. I am able to use my mind and my intellect because of consciousness. So this becomes clear here. But then we go further. What is this consciousness? How does it come into our being? How do we get this consciousness? When does it come into our being? Now, these are questions which Anuman Praman cannot answer. You cannot get an idea of all these answers from Anuman Praman. That is not possible. So, in our Shastras, Shabd Praman is called one of the highest. And what is Shabd Praman? Shabd Praman are the words uttered by those people who have actually passed through that experience. Like Let us take Neil Armstrong. Now, Neil Armstrong said that I landed on the moon and this is how I felt. Now, that is a Shabd Praman. None of us can verify it. It cannot be pratyaks. It cannot be verifiable by any of our sense organs. But since he said that he landed and he felt like this, so that is his Shabd, we have to take it. When we go to a doctor, he examines our body and tells us this is the problem. So we take his words, we take doctor's words and we follow the advice. Similarly, a person who has gone on a very high mountain, say Mount Everest, now he has experienced that thing and he comes and writes down his experiences. So we take it as Shabd Praman. So Shabd Praman is those words which are written down or uttered by those people who have experienced a particular situation and they tell you. So our sages, rishis as we call them, they experienced what we call unity of the supreme soul with the unity of their individual soul. Their unity, their jivatma became one with the supreme soul, and based on that they uttered certain truths, and those truths were written down in the Vedas and the Upanishads, and those are called Shabd Praman. So all these ancient writings of India, which are also called Shruti because they were heard from those people who experienced them directly, that is why it is called Shruti. Smriti is the one which is the second phase, that you heard it, then you memorized it, and then at later stage you wrote it down. So that is the difference between Shruti and Smriti. Like Bhagavad Gita is actually called Smriti, not Shruti, though it was told by Lord Krishna, but it was actually memorized and reiterated by Sanjay, and then it was written down at a later stage. But in case of Vedas and Upanishad, it is said that they are apurushe. Apurushe means they are not written by or uttered by the humans. They are told by the Supreme. Now, told by the Supreme is not possible, but by those people who became one with the Supreme, they are also equal to the Supreme. Like a drop of water, when it falls into the ocean, it becomes part of the ocean. Similarly, when Jivatma gets united with the Supreme Soul, it becomes part of that Supreme Soul, and then it utters certain things which is a very different, experience altogether. And based on that experience comes what we call the Shastras. The real Shastras which they come from those sages and those saints who actually experienced them firsthand, and they wrote it down or somebody else wrote it down. They told to somebody and they wrote it down. So this is how it is. So Shabd Praman is considered very high. So now we will have a look at Shabd Praman, a few verses here and there, because there are vast literature, vast writings on this issue. Actually, the Upanishads are filled with this issue. The most of the Upanishads start with the question that is, what is Brahma? What is Jivatma? Why we have come into this universe? Who has sent us here? Who is managing all that? These fundamental questions of life has been answered in Vedas and Upanishads and some other writings, including Bhagavad Gita. So we will have a look at some of these verses now. And actually, I have used Bhagavad Gita as the principal source on this matter because we have studied it. So I'll go over some of these verses. Now, if we go in chapter 2, verse number 13, verse number 13 says, Dehino asmin yatha dehe, komaram yovnam jara, तथा देहांतर प्राप्तिर धीरस्तत्र न मुह्यते। जैसे जीवात्मा की इस देह में बालकपन, जवानी और वृद्धावस्था होती है, वैसे ही अन्य शरीर की प्राप्ति होती है। You see, as we grow, from childhood we become teenager, from teenager we become adult, from adult we become old, and then we die. So the same soul continues in different bodies. The bodies keep changing. The body is constantly changing. But the same soul continues into the body and then it goes into a new body. So this is how we understand that the soul is actually passing from one body to another, as we discussed earlier. Now let's look at verse number 23. Nainam chiddanti shastrani, nainam dahati pavka, ne chen klediyantya po ne sosyati maruta. That is Atma ko, that consciousness which is there, Jivatma in our body, इसको न शस्त्र काट सकते हैं, न आग इसको जला सकती है, न जल इसको गीला कर सकता है, न वायु इसको सुखा सकती है. So it is beyond all the five, the gross organs or gross elements which constitute this universe. So this soul is beyond all that. It cannot be felt by our sense organs, because sense organs are actually a manifestation of the gross elements which are constituting this universe. Like we discussed this earlier, that this Agni is manifested in our eyesight, eyes. The Akash is manifested in our ears. Earth is manifested in our nostrils, this smell. The water is manifested in our taste. So all these manifestations cannot experience Atma. It is not possible, because they cannot impact on it at all. Similarly, 225, यह आत्मा अव्यक्त है, अव्यक्तो अयम. It is very clearly mentioned by Lord Krishna that यह आत्मा अव्यक्त है means it is not manifested, and without manifestation our sense organs cannot grasp it. And that is why यह आत्मा अचिंत्य है. You can't even think about it, because until and unless you see a thing, or you see a picture of a thing, or if somebody tells you a story, you cannot even think about it. So achintya hai, it cannot be even thought of. Ye atma vikar rahit hai. Vikar rahit means without any quality. There is no color, there is no shape, there is no size. All that is not there, and therefore we cannot feel this atma. This is very clearly mentioned here. इस आत्मा को उपयुक्त प्रकार से जानकर तू शोक करने के युक्त नहीं है, उचित नहीं है तेरे लिए शोक करना. So the soul or the consciousness cannot be understood by this body mind instrument. This is very clear here. All these three verses are telling us this. Let's go to some other verses also. Now 8:18. Verse number 18 in chapter 8, it says, संपूर्ण चराचर भूत गण ब्रह्मा के प्रवेश काल में अव्यक्त से उत्पन्न होते हैं, और ब्रह्मा की रात्रि काल में उस अव्यक्त नामक सूक्ष्म शरीर में लीन हो जाते हैं. Now, it is very clear that they appear from Avyakt and they go back to Avyakt, which is Avyakt is non-manifest, which we cannot see, cannot touch, cannot smell, cannot, feel by any of our sense organs. That is Avyakt. So it is very clear in this that it is all coming from Avyakt. And at the end of the Yuga and when the Pralaya happens, all this return back to that Avyakt. So soul is totally Avyakt. We cannot, uh, you know, understand it by our sense organs. This is very clear here. Now let's go to chapter 15 also, verse number 7, 10, and 11. Now verse number 7 says, इस देह में यह सनातन जीवात्मा मेरा अंश है. Now this is very clearly mentioned by Lord Krishna that in this body, this consciousness which we have, which is called Jivatma, is my particle. It is part of me. It is, I won't say part of me, it is coming from me, from my powers. और वही इन प्रकृति में स्थित मन और पांचों इंद्रियों को आकर्षित करके शरीर को चलाता है. Now this whole process is because of this Jivatma, which is an eternal part of the Supreme in our body. So this is very clear here in verse number 7. Now verse number 10. शरीर को छोड़कर जाते हुए अथवा शरीर में स्थित हुए अथवा विषयों को भोगते हुए को इस प्रकार तीनों गुणों से युक्त हुए को कोई भी अज्ञानी जन नहीं जानता. That this soul cannot be understood even when it is in your body, when it is entering into your body, when it is leaving your body, and when it is, conducting itself in the world, you cannot understand it. केवल ज्ञान रूप नेत्रों वाले विवेकशील ज्ञानी तत्व से जानते हैं. Now we'll come to this part later on. How do you understand Atma? But basically it is saying that you cannot understand it with your sense organs. Whether it is, even when it is in the body, when it is entering the body, when it is leaving the body, when it is conducting itself into various activities through the body, we cannot feel it. It's very, very clear. Then verse number 11. यत्न करने वाले योगी जन भी अपने हृदय में स्थित इस आत्मा को तत्व से जान सकते हैं. यत्न करने वाले योगी जन ही जान सकते हैं, किंतु जिन्होंने अपने अंतःकरण को शुद्ध नहीं किया, ऐसे अज्ञानी जन यत्न करने पर भी आत्मा को नहीं जान सकते. So there is an additional condition that you have to purify your inner instruments completely. You आत्मा को जब भी जानोगे when अंतःकरण की शुद्धि होगी. जिन्होंने अपने अंतःकरण को शुद्ध नहीं किया, अंतःकरण इज mind, intellect, ego, and chit. These four are instruments of antakaran. If we are not able to purify these four instruments, then you cannot see even with efforts, whatever efforts you may do. Even yogi jan will not be able to see it unless you purify this. So this becomes very clear that Atma cannot be, felt or seen with our sense organs, because it is the sense organs which are running because of that Atma. So you cannot see it. They give birth to us. This gives birth to us. This runs our body instrument completely, our mental instrument, and therefore it cannot be realized by those instruments. Now, we go to Mundak and Svetaswatara Upanishad. I have taken one verse each from each of those Upanishads. And from Mundak it is 318. That is the third part first chapter, 8th verse. The human soul cannot be seen by eyes, nor can it be grasped by speech or any other senses. This is very, very clearly mentioned. It cannot be grasped by austerity or action. तप करने से या कर्म करने से भी इसका पता नहीं लगेगा. Only when the inner being is purified by knowledge and meditation, one can behold this indivisible spirit. Now, the same message which was there in Bhagavad Gita is also here. Only when the inner instrument is purified and it is full of knowledge and you meditate, then only you can realize that where your soul is, that you are a soul, you are not a body. Then from Svetasvatar Upanishad, it is 17th verse of the 4th chapter. The universal soul is seated forever in the hearts of creatures. For all the creatures, the universal soul is seated. It could be realized only by the heart, intellect, and mind purified. So now this is very, very clear that the Chaitanya is sitting in each one of us. It is seated there. It is called Jivatma because it is embodied. It is in the body. And that is why it is called Jivatma. And this Jivatma cannot be realized unless we purify our inner instrument. Now, inner instrument is mind, intellect, ego, and chit. If we purify it completely, slowly, we can start seeing this consciousness. Now, this is what we have to do, purification of our inner instrument. We have acquired considerable knowledge from various scriptures. Now we have to meditate and purify our inner instrument. How do we purify? That is a process which we can discuss, I think, in one more session. This purification of inner instrument is extremely important to realize who we are. And that process is uh, not that easy, but not that difficult either. It requires a strong will, it requires resolution, and it requires some efforts and meditation on our part. And then slowly, we can reach in that direction. So this is where I'll stop. So we have realized today that there are, I would say now, 6 layers of the human constitution. The first is the body, the gross body. The second is the sense organs. The third is the mind. The fourth is intellect. The fifth is ego. And the sixth is the consciousness or Jivatma, which is actually the foundation for all these instruments to make them functional. All these instruments work because of that. And in order to realize that, we have to purify our inner self. Without purification, we cannot realize that. Now, based on my own experience, I can tell you that when you are engaged in the world, most often you forget your consciousness. You are driven by your mind. Mind is the principal instrument that drives us 99% of our time. Only when you sit in meditation, only when you are conscious of yourself, then you feel that mind is driving me. Then you feel that intellect is driving me. I'm not driving them. And that realization will gradually increase when we start purifying ourselves. So I think let us take one more session on this issue. where we will discuss how do we purify our inner instrument so that we can feel or we can realize our Jivatma or our consciousness. Thank you very much